I stood in a glittering room where everyone knew Luna's name. And me, I was the washed-up literature ant. But then the most powerful CEO in the industry walked in, looked directly at me and said, "Talia Winter's an honor to finally meet you again." The room froze. Every eye turned to the woman they once dismissed. Minutes later, a hidden truth buried for 5 years was broadcast on a massive screen. If you think this is just another family drama, you're dead wrong. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next jaw-dropping episodes we bring to light. Talia Winters had just finished cleaning the tiny porcelain teacup she always used for chamomile when her phone buzzed across the counter. A single vibration, sharp, mechanical, indifferent, the kind that doesn't make you feel wanted, just obligated. She dried her hands on the hem of her cardigan, glanced at the screen, and felt her breath pause. Luna. The name alone had a way of slicing through the quiet sanctuary of Talia's apartment. Her cousin's messages never came with warmth, just instructions dressed up as invitations. She tapped the screen. Rooftop Halcyon Building, 7 p.m. tonight. Come if you're free. No hi, no hope you're well, no exclamation points. Just 6 short words, cold and casual like a memo passed under a door. Talia stared at the message longer than she should have. She reread it. Then again. Looking for something that wasn't there, an undertone of kindness, a sliver of sincerity. Nothing. Outside, the light was fading, soft amber bleeding into gray, and the city had begun to hum with the restlessness of early evening. She could have ignored it. Most would have. And once upon a time, she might have. But there was something different about this moment. Something about the precise nothingness in that message that lodged itself under her skin. Luna never invited her anywhere unless it served a purpose. That much had always been clear. So why now? Talia stood in the center of her kitchen, still holding the teacup by the rim, her thumb brushing the delicate edge like it might offer a sign. Steam curled up from the mug, mingling with the questions hanging in the air. Was this guilt? No, Luna didn't feel guilt. Was it pity worse? Or maybe it was a test. A final unspoken dare, come show us what you've become. Remind us why we forgot you. Talia placed the cup back into the sink and turned off the overhead light. Her apartment darkened into dusk. Only the warm glow of the lamp by the bookshelf stayed lit, casting a slanted shadow across the wall, filled with spines no one else ever touched. She walked into the bedroom. The closet door creaked like it always did, but she didn't flinch. Talia wasn't a woman of many clothes. Her world was built on pages and silence, not fashion or flair. Still, she scanned the limited collection with an intensity usually reserved for decisions of greater weight. She bypassed the 2 newer dresses bought on clearance, both still with tags, and reached for the navy blue one. Old. Soft. A dress that didn't shout, didn't plead. It simply existed like her. The zipper stuck slightly, but she tugged it past her ribs. The fabric settled against her like memory. Faint traces of lavender still clung to the collar from the last time she'd worn it, her university's end-of-term gathering nearly a year ago. She hadn't stayed long that night either. She opened the drawer in her dresser, fingers brushing velvet and silk, and pulled out the necklace. It was simple. An oval locket tarnished at the edges attached to a thin chain that had dulled to a warm matte gray over time. It had belonged to her mother, who had worn it often when Talia was a child, absent-mindedly thumbing the locket whenever her mind wandered. Talia mimicked that gesture now, standing in front of her narrow mirror, twisting the chain once, then twice until it rested just above the hollow of her throat. She looked at herself. Not with vanity, not even with doubt, just observation. Her hair still thick, brushed back into a low bun, 2 strands slipping loose near her ears. Her lips bare save for a hint of balm. Eyes brown, but on nights like this, storm dark. She didn't look right for where she was going. But she looked real. She slid a worn leather notebook into her shoulder bag, habit more than intention, then paused. A feeling subtle as fog crawled up the back of her neck. There was a knowing in her bones, a ripple in the quiet. Tonight wouldn't be just another gathering where she stood alone by a bar while people exchanged stories of things they hadn't lived and laughed about things they didn't understand. Something was coming. She didn't know what, only that it had been coming for a long time. She grabbed her coat, black structured, the one she wore to book launches and rainy walks across campus. It had seen more rejections than applause, but it held shape. It held silence well. On the way out, she passed her bookshelf again. Her fingers hovered over one spine, Voices That Vanished, a poetry collection by an author who never gave interviews. She smiled faintly and kept walking. Downstairs, the city greeted her with indifference. Sirens in the distance, a woman arguing on a phone 2 blocks over, the blur of headlights carving through the growing dark. She called a ride, waited under the flickering streetlight, and felt the echo of Luna's words again in her mind. Come if you're free. The audacity of that phrase tightened something inside her, as though her time were dust. As though her presence were a footnote. The car arrived. She slid into the back seat without a word, eyes trained on the skyline ahead. The halcyon building rose like glass and ego 40 floors of ambition glowing against the twilight. She'd only seen it once before in a photo Luna had posted on her birthday captioned with something shallow and sparkly. She hadn't been invited that year. As the elevator carried her up floor by floor, Talia felt her heart steady, not racing, not panicked, just aware. When the doors opened, a soft breeze met her first. Then came the sound, the clink of glasses. Murmurs of expensive perfume laughter curved at the edges with cruelty. And beyond the crowd in a pool of artificial moonlight Luna, perfectly styled, perfectly placed, exactly where she wanted to be. Talia adjusted her bag on her shoulder, took one step forward. This was not about making an entrance. This was not about proving anything. It was about witnessing what happened when someone you underestimated walked into the room without needing to announce herself. She exhaled and walked into the storm. The rooftop was drenched in gold light strung with orbs that hovered like artificial stars. The skyline spread out beyond the glass walls, glimmering, humming, unaware. Waiters in fitted black vests moved with rehearsed grace, weaving through a sea of silk and cufflinks. Every laugh sounded practiced, every sip from crystal flutes choreographed, and every person on that rooftop seemed to orbit around their own reflection. Talia stepped out of the elevator with a softness that contrasted sharply against the curated splendor. No one turned, not yet. Her heels clicked against the white marble as she took a few cautious steps forward. Coat still draped over her arm, eyes scanning for something, anything familiar. What she found instead were strangers with calculated smiles, their conversations orbiting topics like market volatility, executive reshuffles, and property values on the coast. This wasn't a party, it was a showcase. And she was decidedly not part of the exhibit. At the far end of the terrace, a floral arch wrapped in twinkling lights framed the entrance to a private corner where a jazz trio played. That's where the real guests were clinking glasses and locking eye contact over stories no one actually finished. That's where Luna was. She hadn't noticed Talia yet. Or maybe she had, and was choosing not to. Talia moved towards a bar. Not for a drink, just for stillness. Her coat rested across her arm like armor she wasn't ready to put down. She stood beside a crystal decanter of something dark and expensive-looking, not touching it. Instead, she stared past the gleam of glass into the space beyond the terrace. The city blurred at this altitude, lights bleeding into one another, indistinct and endless. "Can I get you something?" the bartender asked, his voice low, polite. Talia blinked. "Red wine, whatever's open." He nodded and poured without fanfare. She took the glass, held it not to drink, just to have something between her fingers. Then she heard it. The name. "Oh my God, Luna." That voice, bright, exaggerated, drenched in performative affection, cut through the rooftop like perfume. A woman in emerald silk flung her arms around Luna, whose arrival apparently warranted its own small thunderclap of attention. She wore white, of course she did. A satin column dress that gleamed with every flash of a phone camera. Her hair pulled back into a knot so perfect it looked airbrushed. A thin gold cuff on her left wrist, the one Talia had once given her after their grandfather's funeral. She never returned it. Luna basked, she always did. After soaking in the spotlight, her eyes swept across the crowd and landed on the bar on Talia. For a moment, her smile faltered, the smallest fracture. Then it was back, brighter, sharper. "Excuse me," she said to her companions, and glided across the rooftop like a queen inspecting her kingdom. "Talia," she said as she approached, her voice rising in pitch, "I didn't think you'd actually come." "I got your message," Talia replied, her tone flat neutral. Luna gestured vaguely toward the crowd behind her. "It's a bit over the top, I know. Blame my team." Her team. Talia didn't respond. She brought the wine to her lips and drank this time not because she wanted it, but because it kept her from answering. Luna's gaze dropped to the dress. "You've had that one for a while, haven't you? It still fits you beautifully." It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. "I like things that last," Talia said, setting the glass down. Luna smiled, her teeth white as bone. "Come, let me introduce you." Without waiting for a response, she hooked her hand lightly, superficially under Talia's arm and guided her toward a semicircle of suited professionals. "Everyone, this is my cousin Talia Winters. She's a literature professor," she said with a touch of theatrical reverence. "She teaches, what is it again, 18th century something." "Classical literature," Talia replied evenly. "Oh yes," Luna said with a wave. "All the dusty stuff. Poetry and parchment and metaphors. So charming." A man in tortoiseshell glasses chuckled. "Sounds like an endangered profession." Another woman leaned forward, curiosity thinly veiled behind wine. "Is that, like, full-time?" "It's a university position," Talia said, keeping her tone measured. "Wow," the woman said. "I didn't think they still hired for things like that." "They do," Talia said. "They just don't advertise it on Instagram." A ripple of laughter moved through the group, not with her, but at her. Luna laughed the loudest. "Talia's always been our family's philosopher," she said, draining her glass and placing it on a passing tray. "She used to write little poems on napkins when we were kids. We thought she'd grow up to be a librarian, or maybe, I don't know, a nun." Wait, one of the men said, "Are you working right now or just like taking a sabbatical?" Talia's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm working." There was a beat, a smirk from someone to her right. Then Luna added, "She means she's grading essays. Endless essays. Some of them don't even use punctuation." More laughter. Something warm and bitter rose in Talia's throat. She stepped back slightly from the group, eyes lifting to the skyline. She found a building in the distance with a blinking red antenna and fixed her gaze on it. Anything to keep from looking at Luna. She remembered being 8 years old watching Luna perform a piano recital. When it ended, everyone clapped. Talia had clapped too, so hard her hands stung, and Luna had glanced at her not with thanks but with something cold, something calculating. That look hadn't changed. Talia reached for her wine again. It had already gone warm. She stood in silence as the group's conversation shifted to something else. Vacations in Tuscany, new algorithms in brand analytics, someone's engagement ring. No one asked her another question. And yet she remained stone-still, expression unreadable. She felt Luna's eyes flicker toward her once, like checking to see if the damage had landed. It had, but not in the way Luna wanted, because standing there, surrounded by voices that sounded like empty champagne bottles rattling in a trash bin, Talia wasn't shrinking. She was remembering. And what she remembered wasn't pain. It was clarity. She watched Luna laugh, hand resting lightly on a man's sleeve, posture flawless. She was always so precise, so rehearsed. Talia didn't belong in this world. But she wasn't here to belong. She was here to witness. A breeze rose up from the edge of the rooftop, ruffling the edge of her coat. She stepped back into the shadows by a potted ficus farther from the chatter, closer to the sky. Her fingers brushed the locket at her collarbone. Somewhere inside her, a line began to form, unwritten but certain. This wasn't her downfall. It was her prologue. Talia stood near the edge of the rooftop, her back to the crowd, a city of shadows stretching far beneath her. Her wine glass sat abandoned on a nearby ledge, untouched since the last hollow laugh Luna had flung in her direction. The voices behind her had faded into one indistinct murmur, like the buzzing of bees that had forgotten why they were angry. She didn't need to hear them to know what they were saying. She'd felt it all before, in faculty lounges and family dinners and chance reunions where success was measured not by depth, but by sparkle. She had long ago learned the shape of invisibility. It was quiet, yes, but it pressed against your skin like fog. You breathed it in until you forgot you were holding your breath. And then suddenly the fog broke. There was no dramatic music, no spotlight flickering to life. Only a silence that fell so sharp it felt like it had edges. Conversations stuttered. One by one, faces turned toward the elevator doors as they slid open with a soft chime. He stepped in. Maxwell Reed, CEO of Meridian Syndicate, one of the top 5 media conglomerates on the West Coast. The man whose signature could bankrupt a city paper or launch a career into orbit. He wasn't flashy, didn't need to be. The navy suit he wore was tailored but unpretentious. His shoes were shined but scuffed at the toes. The only indulgence was the steel watch on his wrist, vintage, understated, and rumored to have belonged to his grandfather. He didn't walk with the forced posture of someone playing powerful. He was powerful. He paused just past the threshold, adjusting his cuff once. His eyes scanned the room, not in search of someone, but as though reading the air itself. He nodded once to a senior partner near the bar, politely acknowledged a couple from the board of trustees. Then his eyes landed on Talia, and something in his expression changed. Not the kind of change that flashes and disappears, the kind that grounds, like recognition that cuts through time. He stepped forward, not toward the cluster of executives who instinctively straightened their backs, not toward Luna, who now stood at the center of the gathering circle like a hostess preparing for her curtain call. He walked past all of them directly to the woman in the navy blue dress, with the wine-stained silence standing alone by the railing. And then it happened. He smiled. A real smile, soft at the corners, not performative, not polite. "Miss Winters," he said. Talia turned slowly, startled not by his presence but by the sound of her name on his lips. Not ma'am, not professor, not, "Excuse me, do I know you?" But Talia Winters, spoken with familiarity and something dangerously close to admiration. "I wasn't sure I'd see you here," Maxwell said. And then in front of 30 guests, a dozen executives, and the woman who had orchestrated this entire spectacle, he extended his hand, with both of his. Not a casual shake, not a one-hand-fits-all greeting. He cupped her hand gently between his palms, held it firmly, respectfully, as if she were someone of substance. "It's a pleasure to see you again," he said, truly. The air changed. No one spoke, not even Luna. The group around her had quieted to a hush, so deep the city noise below felt louder than the rooftop itself. Eyes darted from Talia to Maxwell, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Talia's hand didn't tremble, though she felt every pair of eyes pressing against her back. "Mr. Reed," she replied, a voice even but low. "It's been a while." Too long, he said. I've read every word you've published since we last crossed paths, or rather, every word you allowed to be published. A breath caught behind someone. Maxwell's smile remained. You've always had a voice worth remembering. Luna took one step forward, slow, deliberate. She was smiling too, but the edges were too sharp, her shoulders too tight. Mr. Reed, she said sweetly, what a surprise. We didn't expect to see you tonight. He turned toward her, offering a brief nod. Luna, he said coolly, good to see you again. I wasn't sure you'd remember to invite Talia. Luna blinked once, her mouth opening slightly before recovering. Well, we keep the family close, she said too quickly. Talia and I have always been aligned, like train tracks that never meet. Is that so? Maxwell's gaze returned to Talia. I remember her keynote on narrative integrity, the one at the Eastwood Forum 2 years ago. Changed the way I approached internal branding entirely. Surprised more people weren't talking about it. Now there was a tremor in the room. You could feel it ripple through the champagne flutes. Talia had never publicized that talk, never put her name to it, not officially. Someone near the catering table turned, whispered, Wait, she's the one who wrote that. Luna's jaw twitched. Yes, well, we all contribute in different ways. But she was the writer, Maxwell said. And not just a writer, she's the reason we restructured the Ethics Committee's review protocol. Talia looked down, not out of modesty, but out of control. She could feel Luna's breath beside her, now uneven, tight. Talia's always been good with words, Luna said with a tight laugh. She used to write little plays for us as kids, had a very vivid imagination. She's more than imaginative, Maxwell said, not looking at Luna. She's honest, unflinching, rare in this business. Talia inhaled slowly, letting the moment fold into her like warmth. Not vindication, not yet, but presence. She was being seen, not for who she'd pretended to be, not for who someone else had sold her as, but for the quiet, persistent fire that had burned under years of erasure. A woman near the terrace stepped forward. Excuse me, she asked Maxwell gently. Are you talking about the Unspoken Transparency series? That's the one, he said. One of the few campaigns that made me rethink how stories should be told. I never did figure out who authored the concept until now. All eyes landed on Talia again. Luna stepped slightly in front of her. Talia consulted on a few of those pieces, she said, voice brittle. It was a collaborative effort. No, Maxwell said, his tone now quiet but final. I have the original pitch. Handwritten, annotated, with footnotes in the margin. It wasn't collaborative, it was visionary. Silence. Luna's mouth opened, then closed. Talia didn't speak. She didn't have to. The moment had already unfolded, and the unraveling had begun. The spell Luna had spun the image of herself as the sole architect of brilliance, the gatekeeper of innovation, was cracking in front of a room full of people who mattered, people whose opinions shaped not just perception but policy, whose endorsements weren't just symbolic, they were structural. Talia looked up at the sky again, only this time the lights below didn't feel so far away. She glanced at Maxwell, gave a slight nod. Thank you, she said, soft, measured. He met her eyes. I meant every word. And with that, he stepped aside, vanishing back into the crowd like a ripple retreating from a stone dropped into water. But the ripple remained, and its center was her. Not Luna, not anymore. Talia didn't expect to see Maxwell Reed again that night. She thought the moment had passed, its strange magic folded into the noise of clinking glasses and recovering egos. But less than 20 minutes after the rooftop had returned to its artificial laughter, she found herself standing at the far end of the terrace, just beyond the glow of the party, beneath a heater that buzzed softly overhead. And he was there, waiting or maybe just wandering. He turned when she approached and gave her the kind of smile people reserve for someone they respect, quiet, genuine, and free from performance. I hope I didn't embarrass you, Maxwell said, up there. You didn't, Talia replied. You handled it better than I did, he added, leaning casually against the iron railing. I have a bad habit of announcing things without checking if they're meant to be secrets. It wasn't a secret, Talia said. Not exactly, just untold. He studied her for a moment. It mattered, he said. That work you did, it saved our story. The board had already drafted 3 possible exits for me. The reputation damage from the Bracken deal was catastrophic, but that manuscript that turned the tide. Talia looked out toward the skyline. I didn't know it would be published, she said. Not at first. You just asked me to help you understand the language of failure. Maxwell chuckled. I did. And you gave me a voice that didn't sound like a press release. That book wasn't about strategy. It was about confession, and that's why people trusted it. Talia glanced sideways. You could have credited me, I asked, he said. Do you remember I asked twice? She did. She remembered the email. Are you sure you don't want your name on this? And her reply, not yet. I thought I was protecting myself, she murmured. From what? From being known before I was ready to be known. Maxwell nodded. That is fair. But you vanished, Talia. 1 week after the book launched, you were gone. No forwarding contact, no updates, no manuscript follow-ups. You left a vacuum. I didn't mean to disappear, she said softly. I meant to rest. Then I never came back. There was something in her voice now that Maxwell hadn't heard before. Not shame, not regret. Something quieter, more weathered. He leaned forward slightly, voice low. Was it Luna? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence between them filled in the truth like water finding cracks in stone. I remember you asking her to courier your notes, he said. You were buried in revisions and I needed a hard copy delivered to my assistant by Monday. You CC'd her in the email thread. Talia exhaled. I thought it would be faster. She insisted she'd handle it personally, Maxwell said, that she'd safeguard the integrity of the language. Her words, not mine. Talia closed her eyes. I asked her for help, she whispered, and I didn't think twice about it. She said she knew someone at the publishing house, that she could clean the formatting, make the timeline tighter. I trusted her. And she edited more than formatting. Talia nodded. She stripped my voice out of my own words, smoothed the edges until it sounded like him but not like me. She didn't mention you, Maxwell said. Not once. When the publisher called to finalize the credits, they had her listed as the internal communications lead. I assumed that was just a courtesy title. I was wrong. Talia looked down at her hands. The light from the overhead heater cast golden rings around her fingers, flickering with the wind. I didn't know how to come back from that, she said. To call and say, that voice in your book, that was me. It would have sounded bitter, like sour grapes. I didn't want that to be my debut. It wouldn't have been bitter, Maxwell said. It would have been justice. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Justice isn't about being named, she said. It's about being remembered for the right things. He smiled slightly. That's why you wrote it so well. They stood there in stillness. Behind them, the party continued, dimmed, slightly quieter than before, but still full of curated joy. Music floated past the railing, distant and irrelevant. Would you write again? Maxwell asked. Talia blinked. Now, soon, he said. There's a new project, very different from the memoir. It's about integrity in media, how storytelling has become post-truth. I need someone who understands narrative, but isn't addicted to the spotlight. Someone who sees the weight of language. She gave a dry laugh. That's a nice way of saying someone who can ghostwrite. No, he said. Someone who can rewrite the narrative. Not for me this time, for the company, internally. I want a cultural reset. She tilted her head. You'd give me that much freedom. I'd give you the foundation, he said. What you build on it is up to you. We'd publish it under your name. Talia hesitated, then asked why now. Because I saw what happened tonight, he replied. You didn't push, you didn't perform, but when people saw you, they listened. That kind of presence earned, not borrowed, it's rare. Talia looked away, her gaze trailing along the steel edge of the rooftop. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then it's been 5 years since I let myself be proud of anything I wrote. Let's change that, he said. She turned to face him. I'll think about it. Good, he said. Think hard, because when you're ready, the story's still waiting for you. Maxwell checked his watch, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. No pressure, he added, slipping it into her hand. Just the number of someone who still believes in your voice. He nodded once and walked away. Talia stood alone. The card in her hand felt heavier than its weight, not because it was a chance, because it was a reminder. A door she thought she'd bricked shut had never actually been locked. She looked toward the skyline again, the city buzzing below like a hive full of forgotten truths. Then she whispered into the wind, not to him, not to herself, but to the memory of her own voice. I'm not gone. It was 5 years ago, almost to the day. The email had been short, just 3 lines, but it had carried more hope than Talia wanted to admit. The subject line read, Final draft submission ready. She'd spent 7 months writing it. Every night after her lectures, every weekend she turned down invitations, ignored family texts, missed birthdays. She called it her quiet reckoning, a memoir and essays that wove her family's silence into the broader failures of media integrity and personal invisibility. It was fierce but intimate, brutal but clean. She titled it What They Don't Say in the Footnotes. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. She remembered how her hands trembled as she attached the file and wrote the message to Luna. You mentioned knowing someone at Hallworth Books. I'd be grateful if you could pass this along. I trust your judgment. Trust. That word in retrospect now felt like a bruise that never healed properly. At the time, it made sense. Luna had just landed a position as a junior PR associate for a boutique media agency that did consulting for Hallworth. It was the first real overlap their careers had ever had. Talia had thought naively that maybe this was their long-awaited point of reconnection. Luna responded quickly, unusually so. Happy to. I'll print and hand-deliver it to their internal reader this week. Fingers crossed. X. There had even been a lowercase x at the end, playful sisterly. It made Talia smile for the first time in weeks. She didn't know that would be the last time Luna used affection without malice. 4 weeks later, the response came. A form rejection. No name, no salutation, just, thank you for your submission. At this time, we are unable to proceed. We wish you the best in your continued creative journey. There was no feedback, no invitation to resubmit, no notes. Just a wall. Talia stared at the email for 10 full minutes before closing her laptop. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just felt emptied, like a faucet had been running inside her for years and someone had finally turned it off. That night, she took the printed draft pages still marked with handwritten notes, circled metaphors and crossed out lines, and slid it into a box beneath her bed. She didn't open it again, not even when Maxwell's memoir came out and she saw flickers of her phrases embedded in his story. Not even when she caught a side glimpse of a paragraph that mirrored a monologue she had written about the currency of silence. She convinced herself it was coincidence, that she hadn't been original to begin with, until 2 weeks ago. It started as a curiosity, a simple late-night Google search. A name she barely remembered, Isabel Mary. The name had popped up in a publishing newsletter as a rising ghostwriter linked to a string of media success stories, Maxwell reads being the most lucrative. Talia frowned when she read the article. She hadn't heard of Isabel before, but something about the cadence of that name bothered her. It felt borrowed. She searched further. There was no author photo, no interviews, no social media. Just a bio. Isabel Mary is a pseudonym for an internal contributor who prefers to remain anonymous. That night, Talia didn't sleep. Instead, she went digging, deep. Through archived emails, personal drafts, submission logs, she hunted down old versions of the manuscript she had once sent Luna, the one she'd called her Quiet Reckoning. And then she compared it, side by side. Her original chapter, Inherited Walls. Isabel Mary's published chapter, The Legacy of Stone. Different titles, different formatting. Same paragraph structure, same metaphors, same closing line. She ran the entire manuscript through a plagiarism checker. 71% overlap. Her breath caught. She stared at the results, hands clenched on the edge of her desk. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't theft from a stranger. This was Luna. Luna, who had taken their printed manuscript, changed the headers, reworded enough to slide past editorial scrutiny, and submitted it under a fabricated name. And Talia had thanked her for the favor. The next morning, she opened an old Dropbox folder and found something else, an email buried in a chain Luna had mistakenly forwarded years ago. The original metadata listed Talia as the author. The edited file had stripped all identifying details. It had been resaved under the file name, submission final.docs. I am Isabel Mary. Luna hadn't just borrowed her voice. She'd erased her from it. Talia shut her laptop slowly and stared out the window, trying to remember the exact moment she had given Luna that kind of access. Not just to her words, but to her permission. She couldn't, because it hadn't been a moment. It had been a series of small misplaced kindnesses, a lifetime of second chances. A drawer full of excuses for someone who smiled when the cameras were on and stole in the quiet. That afternoon, Talia walked to the university library and pulled Maxwell's memoir off the shelf. She opened to page 194. There it was, a story about watching his daughter rehearse a speech. The description was almost verbatim to a memory Talia had written, except in hers, it was her younger cousin Luna standing in front of a mirror reciting lines from a school play. She read the next page, then the next, until she couldn't anymore. When she left the library, the book stayed behind. But something else followed her out, a sharp, unrelenting clarity. This wasn't an accident. It was a design. A theft disguised as elevation. A distortion made palatable because it was cloaked in elegance. Luna had become everything the publishing world adored, slick, poised, articulate. But beneath the surface, she had fed off the lives of others. Their wounds, their truths, especially Talia's. And Talia, she had been too ashamed of her own silence to fight it. Until now. That evening, she retrieved the manuscript box from under her bed. The paper had yellowed slightly at the corners, but the ink was intact. The title still scratched in bold ink across the cover. She opened to the first page and started reading aloud. Her voice was soft, at first uncertain, but with each paragraph it steadied, grew louder. She made it to chapter 3 before stopping. Not because it was hard, because it wasn't anymore. The story had always been hers. She just needed to say it this time with her name on the cover. Talia left without a goodbye. No drawn-out exit, no clinking glass or final stare down. She simply slipped out from the rooftop terrace while most of the crowd was still busy recalibrating the moment she had just shattered. Her navy coat swung over one shoulder, her heels silent against the polished marble. The only thing she left behind intentionally precisely was a slim manila envelope tucked deep into the inner pocket of Maxwell Reed's overcoat. No label, no note, just wait. And inside 94 printed pages, unedited, raw, steady. Her new manuscript. The story was no longer a memoir, it was a reckoning. Its title, Inheritance Without Permission. She didn't tell him she was leaving it there. Didn't tell him she'd written it. Didn't tell him what it meant. Because if he recognized the voice, if he still knew the language of her thought, he would understand. And if he didn't, then the pages didn't belong to him. Outside, the night was crisp. Talia inhaled deeply as the city opened up around her, wide and glittering and for once quiet. No one followed. No one called out her name. and for the first time in years, she didn't mind. Back upstairs, Luna was smiling, still performing, still holding the last threads of the party together, weaving charm into conversation, brushing off any mention of that strange moment with the CEO with practiced ease. Her smile was lined with teeth, her voice honey-lace steel. But beneath her skin, something was twitching. She could feel it, the shift. She saw how people looked at her now, not with admiration but calculation. Like they were measuring something behind her that might be taller, quieter, more substantial. They were remembering Talia, and worse, they were forgetting who introduced her. It wasn't panic yet, not exactly. It was erosion. Luna watched Maxwell move toward the elevator, reaching for his overcoat as a valet approached. He had left early, a rarity for him. He usually lingered, shook hands twice, let cameras catch him departing like a closing bell. But tonight he was already sliding into his jacket, stepping past the waiting crowd, like he had somewhere more urgent to be. And he looked preoccupied. Luna knew that look. She'd seen it in meetings and negotiation rooms, in those rare moments when the man's mind had clicked onto something unmovable. It meant something had gotten under his skin and she needed to know what. "Max," she called lightly, moving toward him. "Need help getting to the car? You know, this rooftop isn't ADA compliant, which is ironic for a company that prides itself on inclusivity." He gave a short, distracted laugh. "Thanks, Luna, I've got it." She offered her arm anyway, looping it through his as the valet brought the car around. "Let me walk you out," she said, voice butter smooth, for optics at least. He didn't protest, too polite, too distracted, which was exactly what she counted on. As they reached the car, Maxwell opened the back door and leaned inside. She took the moment, the brief 10-second gap when his attention was elsewhere, to pull the overcoat closer to her. Her hand dipped into the inside pocket casually, as if brushing lint. Her fingers hit the envelope. She stilled. The texture was unmistakable, thicker than business documents, too soft to be legal files. Her hand closed around it. She slid it out just enough to see the corner of the first page. And the name, "Inheritance Without Permission," by Talia Winters. Her pulse slammed against her ribs. "Everything okay?" Maxwell asked, turning his head. Luna smiled. "Just straightening the collar," she said, tucking the envelope back into the coat and giving his shoulder a friendly pat. He nodded and ducked into the car. The door closed, and she turned, walking calmly back into the building with a face made of glass. Inside the elevator, she rode down alone, the envelope now slipped into her own clutch bag. She didn't wait, didn't speak, just walked with precision back into the PR suite on the 29th floor and locked the door behind her. Only then did she tear the envelope open. The pages came out cleanly, like a confession sliding off someone's tongue. She read the first paragraph, then the second. By page 4, her hands had gone cold. It wasn't fiction. It wasn't an essay collection. It was a mirror. A precise, unflinching account of the way Luna had dismantled Talia's original manuscript and sent it under another name. The phrasing wasn't accusatory, it was analytical. But that made it worse. It didn't beg for sympathy. It didn't whine. It just showed. Line after line, it laid bare the timeline, the day Talia handed over the final draft, the date the metadata was altered, the phrases that were lifted and twisted, the name Isabel Mary exposed as a fabrication, a ghostwriter with no past, no interviews, no LinkedIn trail. The pseudonym that Luna had claimed for herself filtered through a screen of deniability. Talia hadn't written this to hurt her. She'd written it to record her. And it was devastating. Because if this manuscript ever saw light, Luna wouldn't just lose credibility. She wouldn't just be shamed. She would be disqualified legally, reputationally, professionally. Fraud, ethics violations, a public unraveling that no charm campaign could clean up. She read on, page 12, page 23, page 47. Each chapter traced back moments. Luna thought she had buried conversations, half-whispered drafts. She thought she had deleted favors she framed as mentorship. And worst of all, it was good. Too good. Even she couldn't argue with it. The voice was calm, unflinching, surgical. It didn't attack. It dismantled. She reached the end. The final sentence wasn't a threat. It was a reflection. Some people borrow light to grow. Others burn the garden to pretend they were sunlight all along. Luna sat very still, the pages fanned out on her desk like ash. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. The rooftop lights were dimming. The guests were leaving. And inside her, beneath the tailored dress, beneath the smooth foundation, beneath the smile she still hadn't let go, there was a fire starting to spread. It wasn't anger. It was exposure. And it was just beginning. Luna didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen counter, barefoot, still in the dress from the rooftop, the manuscript spread before her like a silent threat. She had tried to tell herself it was just words, just perspective, that no one would believe a woman who disappeared for 5 years only to reemerge with a story of theft dressed in literary prose. But as dawn crept into the glass walls of her apartment, she knew better. If this manuscript got out, it would destroy her. And not in headlines, in footnotes. It would unwind her career the same way she had built it quietly, strategically, one credit line at a time. By noon, she was in a private office on the 12th floor of a boutique legal firm known for making inconvenient problems disappear. The lawyer they sent was a man named Barton Shearer, gray-suited, soft-voiced, and absurdly expensive. She handed him the manuscript. He read the first 2 pages and nodded once. "You want to suppress this?" "I want to stop it from ever reaching print," she said. "On what grounds?" "Defamation," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Shearer paused. "You're not named. It's obviously about me." "Obvious isn't actionable." Luna leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "Then make it actionable." He folded his hands. "Your best option is to identify the publisher. If this has been submitted, we can file a cease and desist, maybe a restraining order. But we need the destination." She swallowed. "I can get that." By evening, she had activated 3 favors and a non-disclosure protected email thread with a contact at Denham Publishing, one of the most discreet houses in California, known for working with anonymous authors and whistleblower projects. The contact confirmed it. A manuscript matching the title, Inheritance Without Permission, had landed on an editor's desk 2 days earlier, accompanied by a handwritten note, no return address, and a prepaid legal envelope with only 2 words inside. Let the words prove their author. And it was already an internal review. By 10 p.m., Luna had filed a formal threat through Shearer's firm, citing unverified authorship, potential corporate defamation, and misuse of private internal phrasing she herself had once extracted from Talia's original work. The goal wasn't to win. The goal was to delay, stall the process long enough to reframe the narrative. But Luna hadn't counted on one thing. Talia knew the manuscript had landed exactly where she wanted. And she also knew Luna's first move would be to bury it. So Talia moved first quietly, efficiently, methodically. She began with her own files. 3 portable hard drives, 2 backup laptops, and a 6-year-old thumb drive she hadn't touched since the week Luna became a creative advisor. She cross-referenced dates, emails, draft titles, everything that had once made her think she was collaborating when in fact she'd been contributing to Luna's resume without ever seeing her name in lights. The most damning trail led back to an internal newsletter from 5 years ago, a think piece titled Narrative Currency: How Story Shapes Authority, published under Meridian's internal ethics blog. The byline read, "Luna B. Vaughn, Chief Narrative Strategist." But the article was lifted directly verbatim from a conference paper Talia had presented at a regional symposium on literary power and political language. At the time, Talia had emailed it to Luna with a note. "Feel free to read this and tell me what doesn't land. I want to sharpen the metaphor before I pitch it." Luna had responded, "Brilliant stuff. I'll workshop it with my team and help get it tighter. You'll thank me later." She never did. The final publication carried a footnote adapted by the internal ethics team under Luna Vaughn's guidance. No mention of Talia, no mention of the original paper, no trail except the one Talia had just reopened. She traced 3 more articles across different platforms, 2 branded editorials, 1 white paper for an ESG panel, and a ghostwritten segment of a CEO's LinkedIn manifesto. All of them recycled her writing, not copied, repurposed. The changes were subtle, switching a metaphor from literature to architecture, changing passive to active voice, modernizing analogies. But the bones were the same, and the pattern was undeniable. Each piece had been tied to a made-up title: internal creative advisor, ethics, language architect, strategic thought developer. None of these roles had existed on paper. They were shells Luna had created to justify her claim to the content. And because Talia had trusted her because she'd handed over ideas like they were nothing more than favor trading, those roles had become Luna's ladder. Now Talia pulled out a legal pad and started mapping it out. Left column, her original submissions; right column, Luna's public credits; in between, the timeline of alteration. By midnight, she had a dozen lines drawn in ink, each one connecting her silence to Luna's voice. Then she printed them all. A dossier? She didn't send it. Not yet. Because this wasn't about exposing Luna publicly. Not yet. This was about ensuring that when the moment came, no one could say they were surprised. She called a friend, Noel Vasquez, a copyright attorney who had once taken Talia's ethics course during undergrad. Noel didn't ask questions. She only said, "Send me the files." By the next day, Noel replied, "You're not only the author, you're the origin. If they've used any of this commercially, it's breach and exploitation, possibly even fraud." Talia sat in silence, reading the message over and over again. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was legal. She opened Luna's personal site, the one linked to her agency page. There, beneath the glowing endorsements and press clips, was a tagline: "Empowering companies with narrative authority." And beneath that, known for shaping the core messaging behind today's top ethical leaders. Talia let the screen go dark. Then she whispered, without anger, without hesitation, "Not anymore." The invitation wasn't extended. It was requested. Talia had submitted the formal application through Meridian Syndicate's legal department, citing a clause in the shareholder participation policy. In cases of disputed authorship, any party with substantiated intellectual property claims may request temporary observation status before the internal board. The reply came in under 12 hours. Approved. A seat would be reserved. Materials pre-circulated. Time allocated 7 minutes, no more. It was enough. On the morning of the meeting, she wore black not for drama, but for clarity. A soft wool pantsuit sharp at the seams with a high-neck blouse and her hair pulled into a quiet knot. No jewelry, no colors. The only ornament was a thin silver pen clipped inside her portfolio. At exactly 8:27 a.m., Talia walked through the revolving doors of Meridian's downtown headquarters. The marble lobby glistened hushed, every sound softened by design. A woman at the front desk gestured silently to the 33rd floor. The elevator was silent. So was she. At the top, a junior associate with perfect posture ushered her into the glass-walled boardroom. A long oak table stretched down the middle, surrounded by men and women in pressed suits reviewing glossy reports and sipping dark coffee from white porcelain cups. She took her seat at the far end, 2 seats down from Luna. Luna didn't look up. But Talia saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her left hand gripped her stylus harder than necessary. She wasn't calm. She was cornered. The meeting began with standard updates, earnings reports, market share projections, upcoming M&A rumors. Talia listened, silent eyes tracing the arcs of familiar spin. But her mind wasn't on numbers. It was on her moment. When the agenda reached item 9, IP dispute presentation, narrative ethics and authorship review, the room shifted. All chatter ceased. Maxwell looked up from his tablet. "Ms. Winters, you may proceed." Talia stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't clear her throat. She simply opened the black folder in front of her and pulled out the timeline. 12 pages. Each one printed with date-stamped submissions, corresponding email chains, original drafts, and published materials credited to Luna Vaughn or various subsidiaries under her narrative leadership. "This is a record," Talia began, "of the intellectual property I developed while under informal collaboration with Ms. Vaughn, then a junior PR associate with limited editorial clearance. At no point was I compensated, credited, or given review access to the final uses of these works." She slid the first page to the closest board member. They passed it on. Each sheet carried 3 columns. Date submitted original. Final use in published media. Credit attribution? It was devastating in its precision. Legal, dry, but undeniable. This includes original essays, pitch documents, annotated strategy outlines, and internal communications, she continued, all of which predate the official positions Ms. Vaughn later assumed. She looked at Luna not with malice, but with clarity. These works weren't collaborative. They were repurposed, without consent. Luna leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Talia, we've been through this. A lot of the material was inspired by joint discussions, shared brainstorming. We exchanged ideas freely." "Free doesn't mean uncredited," Talia replied. "And joint discussion doesn't equal joint authorship when one party rewrites the other's work, attaches their name, and submits it for financial and reputational gain." A low murmur moved through the boardroom. Maxwell sat forward, now hands clasped, elbows on the table. Talia pulled one final document from her folder. A printed version of the internal article that launched Luna's title as Chief Narrative Strategist, the one that echoed almost word for word a lecture Talia had once given in New York, attended by less than 50 people. "I didn't even know this piece existed until last month," Talia said. "But the phrasing, particularly the close of paragraph 3, is identical to my unpublished conference notes. Notes that were only ever shared with one person." Maxwell took the document. "Read it," paused, then looked directly at Talia. "Can you verify the timeline on this?" he asked. Talia nodded. "Yes." The original keynote was submitted to the Eastwood Archive 6 months before this article appeared. Their timestamp and digital certificate are still on file. Maxwell turned to the boardroom. "Is there any dispute regarding the metadata or timestamps on these documents?" A man in wire-rimmed glasses, head of compliance, cleared his throat. "We ran a preliminary check this morning, sir. All metadata aligns with Ms. Winters' account. Her email servers confirm the origination dates. No anomalies detected." Silence. Maxwell looked at Luna. She stared back. Expression unreadable. He said nothing. Instead, he pushed back from his chair, stood, and walked to the head of the table. He picked up a separate folder, thinner red tabbed. "Last night, I requested a cross-check of the internal project logs and HR title creation forms. Ms. Vaughn's title as Chief Narrative Strategist was approved based on a memo outlining her contributions to a body of work. That memo, dated 6 years ago, was authored by her and attached to excerpts lifted directly from Talia's original writing." Luna's voice came fast. "I adapted those concepts. That's not the same as copying." "Concepts don't have fingerprints," Maxwell said quietly, "but writing does." He turned to Talia. "I want to acknowledge publicly and here on the record that the work you contributed has shaped the language of this company more than we realized. We failed to credit you. I failed to investigate that failure sooner." He placed his hand over the folder. "I apologize." The words landed not with drama, but with weight. Talia breathed in, not relief, not triumph, just oxygen. Luna's jaw tightened. So what happens now, she asked cold. Maxwell didn't answer. Instead, he looked around the room. I'm moving to open an internal ethics review of narrative authorship practices over the past 7 years. We'll also conduct a formal audit of every piece published under Ms. Vaughn's advisory roles and establish proper authorship attribution moving forward. He turned back to Talia. And if you're willing, we'd like to commission you to lead that process. The boardroom went still, all eyes on her. Talia didn't blink. She nodded once. I'm willing. The lights were crystalline. The Meridian Syndicate's anniversary gala had always been excessive, but this year the 25th was a declaration of empire. Crystal chandeliers reflected off glass columns, champagne flowed through vertical fountains, journalists, influencers, and executives in bespoke tuxedos clinked glasses and rehearsed soundbites beneath golden banners. On stage, a curved LED wall pulsed with corporate triumphs, 25 years of ethical leadership innovation through story voices that move markets. And tonight, at the apex of spectacle, the company would crown its most visible architect, Luna Vaughn. Backstage, she stood under the shimmer of vanity lights, flanked by 2 stylists smoothing her sleeves and retouching her cheekbones. She wore a silver sheath dress with sharp shoulders and a neckline designed to convey elegance and control. Her acceptance speech was memorized. She had recited it 10 times that morning. Tonight, we celebrate narrative as more than communication, it's transformation. And I'm honored to have shaped that transformation with the team that made it possible. A perfect blend of modesty and assertion. On cue, the MC's voice boomed from the ballroom. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. This year's award for Most Inspiring Young Leader goes to a woman whose language redefined how ethics and storytelling merge in the corporate age, our very own Luna Vaughn. Thunderous applause erupted. She inhaled once, smiled, and stepped into the light. Flashbulbs ignited as she crossed the stage. The crowd rose to their feet. The screen behind her flickered to life, beginning its carefully curated montage. Snippets of Luna in strategy meetings, headlines she had written, quotes from panels edited for impact, sound bites with her name, her face, her voice. She reached the podium. The music faded. Luna placed a hand over her heart, tilted her chin just slightly to the left for camera symmetry, and leaned toward the mic. But before a word could leave her lips, the screen behind her glitched. Once, twice. And then it changed. The gala's branding disappeared. The music didn't resume. Instead, the screen cut to a new video file already mid-roll. A boardroom, clear audio. Maxwell Reed stood at the head of the table. His voice filled the room. I want to acknowledge publicly and here on the record that the work Ms. Winters contributed has shaped the language of this company more than we realized. We failed to credit her. I failed to investigate that failure sooner. I apologize. Then a still frame of a timeline. 3 columns, dates, attributions. The camera cut to Talia, calm, composed, presenting the document stack. The voiceover Maxwell again. We're conducting a formal audit of every piece published under Ms. Vaughn's titles, and we will credit Ms. Winters properly moving forward. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Phones came out. Some guests turned toward Luna, others toward the shadows. The spotlight had shifted. It no longer crowned Luna's sequined silhouette. It had rotated slowly, silently toward a woman standing beneath the mezzanine steps, dressed in black. No diamonds, no spotlight before now. But the light found her. Talia Winters, her face calm, her eyes unreadable. She did not step forward. Not yet. On stage, Luna's hands had frozen on the podium. Her smile was still there almost. But her body had gone still. Only her throat moved, tightening, with every word still echoing across the screen. Behind her, the video ended on a single frame. Author Talia Winters' original title, Inheritance Without Permission, published coming soon. No music followed. Only silence. The MC didn't return. There was no cue. There was no plan for this. Maxwell stood from his table near the front row, walked up the stage, took the microphone. Luna stepped back, expression flat, pale beneath the spotlights. Maxwell looked to this crowd, then to the camera broadcasting live on Meridian's internal stream, and to the press outlet streaming the gala to subscribers in real time. He didn't offer a speech. He offered a correction. Tonight's intended honor was based on a premise one we now know to be incomplete. In the spirit of truth which this company claims as its foundation, I'd like to redirect that honor. He turned, faced Talia. I'd like to invite the real architect of Meridian's language, its conscience in the shadows, to the stage. Applause didn't follow. Not at first. There was too much processing. Too many rewrites happening in real-time, public opinion folding in on itself like a rigged card tower. But as Talia stepped forward slowly without drama, the first claps began. Scattered, then steady, then full. She walked through the crowd, not elevated, not triumphant, just moving forward. As if finally her name belonged to the room, Luna remained on stage, watching her, frozen. Talia passed her, their eyes meeting for only a second. No words exchanged, but it wasn't necessary. Because this wasn't vengeance. This was recognition. Talia took the podium. The spotlight adjusted. She didn't bring notes. She didn't bring a speech. Just one sentence. For every woman who's been told her words were too quiet to matter, this is what it looks like when they echo. Silence. Then the room erupted, not in chaos, in clarity. Luna turned, stepped off the stage, her heels clicking, retreating into the shadows where credit had once been stolen. Talia stood where she once wasn't welcome, and the light didn't flicker. It held. The applause had softened into a hum, unspoken, unsure, like the room itself was afraid of what might come next. Talia stood alone on stage. Behind her, the screen still held her name in white letters, no longer hidden beneath someone else's title. The gala lights, once dancing with promotional gloss, now froze in a neutral, almost reverent hue. She took the microphone and didn't speak. Not right away. She let the silence sit there as though she was finally allowed to inhabit it, not as a shadow, but as its author. Then she inhaled and began. I was never meant to be on a stage like this. A ripple moved through the ballroom. I wasn't raised to speak. I was raised to listen, to keep quiet when others talked louder, to be polite when someone else took credit, to sit still when the room moved past me like I wasn't there. Her voice didn't waver, it didn't tremble, it unfolded. Some of you may know me from the articles you've quoted, the essays you've reposted, the stories you've passed along at panels and conferences without knowing whose voice you were actually hearing. She looked across the sea of faces, some confused, some embarrassed. And that was by design. A pause. Not just by Luna, but by the silence around her. A silence I let happen for too long. She stepped forward slightly. My family's not here tonight, but maybe they'll watch this. Maybe they'll recognize the voice even if they never recognized the presence. A sharper breath now. I want to tell you something about families like mine. About dinners where everyone laughs at the same joke except you. Where someone else's daughter always wins the praise, always gets the second helping, always sits at the head of the table. A murmur moved in the back. I was at those dinners, every year, birthdays, holidays, barbecues, and every single time Luna was the sun. Bright, loud, charming. I was context. A shadow in the room that helped make her shine brighter. A bitter chuckle, soft and controlled. They used to call me the academic cousin. Said it like it was cute. Like it meant I had opinions but no real use. Her voice slowed. I remember one year I must have been 25, we were at a holiday party and Luna stood up to give a toast. Everyone clapped. And afterwards, someone, I think it was Uncle Gerard, turned to me and said, "See, you just don't have that spark, honey. That girl was born for this." She looked straight into the camera now, her voice growing firmer. But I wasn't born for this. I built it. In silence. In footnotes. In midnight drafts I sent into the void thinking someone might see past the quiet. Another pause. They didn't. She paced slowly, not as performance but as recollection. And when I submitted my first manuscript, I trusted Luna to help me navigate a world I didn't understand. I thought we were family. I thought she saw me. Her hands tightened around the edges of the podium. She did see me, but not as kin. She saw a mirror she could take from a name she could remove, a foundation she could pave over. Gasps whispered through the crowd. Still, she didn't break. And when I vanished from that world, no one asked why. Not a single family member picked up the phone. Not one friend in publishing noticed I stopped writing. They just accepted the story that I'd moved on. Her voice dipped, now more intimate. They were comfortable with my silence, because it kept the myth intact. Then she looked up. But here's what silence actually does. She let the quiet stretch again. It teaches you to hear things no one else can. She exhaled. It teaches you to hear yourself. A murmur of agreement began at the edges of the room. I didn't come here to ruin anyone. I didn't come here for applause. I came here to unburden a truth I carried for too long alone. Her tone cracked slightly, but not in weakness. I thought if I just stayed small long enough, someone would make room for me. She looked directly at where Luna had been seated moments earlier. But sometimes you don't get the seat. You build your own table. A silence followed. She placed both hands on the podium. Imposter syndrome isn't always imaginary. Sometimes you've been made to feel like an imposter in your own story. And healing is not about forgiveness, it's about reclamation. Now she stepped away from the mic slightly, then back again. I know some of you may think this is too public, too messy, too emotional for a corporate stage. She smiled genuinely now. But so was the theft. The crowd held its breath. And if you've ever been the one who was told, be grateful for the scraps, don't stir the pot, or that's just how it works, this is for you. She turned toward the light. Im lang kong paila that bai, do la luk toi lang nge chin min lon len. Silence. Then the first person stood, followed by another, and another, until the entire ballroom was on its feet. Not in celebration, in witness. Talia didn't bow, didn't smile for the cameras. She simply stepped back away from the mic, away from the light, and walked off the stage as quietly as she had entered. But this time everyone watched, and no one looked away. The headlines came in waves. Meridian faces crisis over ghostwriting scandal. Creative director suspended amid authorship controversy. Ethics in corporate storytelling under fire. Luna's photo was everywhere, once lit with admiration, now etched with betrayal. Media outlets replayed the gala footage endlessly, the frozen smile, the glitched screen, the slow shift of spotlight. The public loved a fall from grace almost as much as they adored a redemption arc. But this wasn't her story anymore. Within 72 hours, Luna was placed on indefinite leave, her name wiped from official branding decks. The advisory board issued a statement of regretful oversight. Damage control had a scent clinical, impersonal, and desperate. Meridian's stock dipped 10% in 2 days. In the group chats that once buzzed with Luna's wit, there was only silence. But in Talia's inbox, the noise was deafening. Agents, editors, professors, panel organizers, bookstore chains, podcasts, think tanks. We'd love to feature your voice. You belong in this conversation. How soon can you come to Boston? But among them, beneath the contracts and invites, was a short message from a number she knew by heart. Mom, you could have kept it quiet. You didn't have to ruin everything. You split the family. You broke Luna. Was it worth it? Talia read it once. Then again, she didn't cry. Not this time. She set the phone down without replying, slid it into a drawer, locked it, then signed her publishing contract. The ink was permanent. So was the name at the bottom. Not a pseudonym. Not a courtesy credit. Just 3 simple rightful words. Talia F. Winters. She moved to Boston in early spring. The air there felt cleaner, less scripted. Her new office at Fenwick University overlooked a garden that had once been a cemetery, ironic maybe, but fitting. Things buried didn't stay buried forever. On her first day, she brought no fanfare, just a copy of her manuscript and a cup of black tea. Her lecture hall was modest, full of students who didn't know her past, only her prose. She began her first class with a question. What's the difference between a ghostwriter and a ghost? Someone joked, ghosts don't get royalties. She smiled. Correct, but more importantly, ghosts don't get heard. Today we talk about reclaiming narrative space. The students leaned in, and for the first time she taught her own words, in her own voice, in her own name. No shadows, no stolen light, only truth spoken, printed, and fully hers. The sun was soft, not timid, just honest. It bathed the rooftop in that golden hour warmth where shadows no longer threatened, only traced. The edge of the railing was cool against her fingers as Talia leaned over slightly, breathing in a sky that no longer pressed down. This rooftop was hers now, not rented, not borrowed, not symbolic. Real, owned, earned. A hawk drifted overhead, tracing lazy circles above the city skyline. She followed its flight with her eyes quiet, steady, calm. Below her, the noise of Boston moved, as it always had: cars, sirens, laughter, silence trains. But none of it reached this height in full volume, not the way memory once had. At her feet, a cardboard box, small but solid. The shipping label had her name. No company name over it, no department filter, no marketing veneer. Just Talia Winters, author. She opened it. Inside, layered in crisp paper and protective wrap, was the first print edition. Thick spine, matte finish, no blurbs, no ghostwritten tricks. The cover was her title in her typeface. Her name printed in bold, embossed letters that caught the afternoon sun. She took the book in both hands, ran her thumb down the spine, opened to the dedication page. To those who were spoken over, and to the silence that made me brave enough to speak. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she sat at the corner of the terrace, legs curled beneath her, and rested the book on her knees. No phone buzzed. No press called. No one tried to stop her, and the piece felt radical in its simplicity. She looked out again, not downward, forward. Her voice, quiet at first, moved with the wind, the voice of someone no longer hiding from the echo. I never wanted to take anyone down. That's not strength. That's a game. And I've stopped playing games I was never meant to win. She looked at the skyline, let it see her now. I didn't reclaim my voice by shouting louder. I didn't climb by stepping over someone else. I didn't burn a world just to watch it fall. A pause. I simply walked out of the shadow. She touched the edge of the book's cover again, and let the light find where it always should have been. A deep exhale. The kind that empties more than lungs. The kind that frees a life. Fade out. The camera pulls back, slowly rising over the city as the rooftop shrinks, but her presence remains steady still. Music swells strings and wind, gentle and whole. No crescendo, no climax, just presence. Healing, pride, freedom. The final frame holds for one last moment, then fades to black, and her name remains just one more time. Talia Winters.